Okay, morning everybody. Pete Hansen Football here. I am with longtime head coach Bob Camirand, Concord, New Hampshire, Concord High, Crimson Tide. We are down at Memorial Field and we're going to take a little walk around and talk a little football today. So, Coach, this is a special time for me because I played for you back in the 80s. I don't want to date us too much. It was the late 80s though, yeah. so we're not going back too far. But tell me a little bit about, your upbringing. Where'd you grow up? How did you get into football? Did you play over in college? And how did you get into coaching? Like, what really motivated you? But let's go way back to the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Manchester, New Hampshire. I was a product of a broken home in inner city. Not really many role models. People I associated with as role models were generally youth coaches. Started playing football in the 6th grade. Manchester was in the 2nd year of the Potman football organization.
Okay.
And it was broken up into different areas of Manchester: north, south, east, west, southwest. Bedford was a member of the league as well. I played for the inner city Central Giants for 3 years. Dick Giardi. That was my first introduction to organized football.
So what age group is that then?
That was ages, 12 through 13, so 6th,
Okay.
7th, and 8th grade.
So is that considered like Pop Warner? Or?
It was Pop Warner back then. There were weight limits. I believe it was something like 101 pounds, so 135 pounds.
135, right.
A lot of good football players didn't get the opportunity to play because they were 3 or 4 pounds overweight.
Right. All right. Okay, Coach, so you were playing Pop Warner in the Manchester area, and they had, sounds like, pretty big league, several teams, correct?
That's correct, yep. And as I said, I started playing Pop Warner in the 6th grade, played till the 8th grade, and that's where I got the bite, the fever. Loved the game, and pretty much was excited to become a high school football player at Central. High school football players were pretty much our heroes back then, because high schools didn't provide all the sports that they provide today. Back in that day, in the early 60s, you had basketball, baseball, and football, That
was it.
Track was offered, but not many people were involved with it. So,
right.
in order to be involved with people, kids, identity, being on a varsity team was pretty special and pretty important.
Kind of gave you that identity, being a part of something
Absolutely,
bigger.
absolutely.
Not just yourself trying to figure things out. Now, I was reading an article, because I did a little bit of research on you, Coach, just to refresh my memory, but you mentioned, I think, a guy named Red Potman.
Red Potman was my 7th grade teacher.
What was...
Well, his influence was, he pretty much initiated me or introduced me to education. And he was the first teacher I had where I observed him enjoying what he did.
Yep.
And he had fun doing it. He was stern, he was strict, and he made you accountable.
Was he a coach too, or no?
No, he was just a 7th grade teacher, self-contained classroom, but he'd go out on the playground and shoot hoops with us and, play wiffle ball and all the above. And, I watched him and I said to myself, that's something I could consider doing, and I think it would be a fun thing to do for the rest of your life. So that planted the seed.
Yeah, now from that article, I remember reading something about, maybe you weren't doing all the right things at that point. He kind of pulled you aside and said, hey, hey, son.
He pretty much gave me an option or choice. And, I was, like I said, I lived with my mother in the inner city, and there were opportunities to do the right and the wrong thing. And there were times I did the wrong thing. And, he took it upon himself, take me out in the hallway and said, look, things aren't very good for you, and I understand that. But you need to understand, you're the only one who can make things better. And you have to make a decision as to whether or not clean up your act and become something of yourself, or, go down the road where you're going to be in trouble. So it was at that point I sat back and he encouraged me to get involved with sports, which I did. And then I got involved with sports, which ironically are generally good people, that aren't going to do the wrong things. And
a lot of structure.
For sure.
Something to do every day
through association, I became, I look at them and look at their families and whatnot, and that's how I learned what to do, how to do, and when to do it.
Yeah, good. So Red played a big part of that. felt like you were getting back on the right track. So then you get into what, high school, Central High?
I get
Manchester?
8th grade. I played for CYO coach Sonny Griffin, who was legendary in Manchester. Played basketball for him, and he, again, provided the structure, the accountability, and the commitment that you needed to have. And from there, I went to high school and got involved with football. Football at Central High School at the time wasn't very good. They had a very demanding coach, somebody really hard to play for. The school roughly was about 2,000 kids, and we had 29 kids in the entire program. Because,
really?
Oh,
because of the coach?
Because, well, he was, like I said, demanding. He was tough, and not many people wanted to venture into football because of that. So we survived. We got through it, and it was through that, again, football seed was planted, and I felt, a need to, or a want to get involved with it and stay involved with it. So from high school, we went to Ferrum Junior College in Virginia, and I went down there. Previous year, two of Central's players, Jim Schubert and John Mazalewski, were down there along with two other guys from Memorial, Mike Bradley and Mike O'Shaughnessy. They had success down there, and Jim came home and asked me if I wanted to go there. I didn't have any options academically, so we went down there and we played junior college football.
Yeah.
And then from there, I came to the realization that the world wasn't looking for 180-pound centers, so I had to, get a reality check.
You do collide with reality every once in a while.
It does, and if anything, it
humbles
gave me,
you a little bit.
It sure did. My first day of practice, I'm down there, and we break up.
This isn't New Hampshire anymore.
Well, you get down there, and there's 120 kids on the team.
Yeah.
Every one of them's captain of their team, and all state, and all conference, and all the above.
And they all love playing football and working hard.
We broke up in a position, and I get down there, and there's 9 centers down there. I said,
and they're all over 200.
Well, I said, okay. So I worked as hard as I could, and I worked my way up to third string, which I thought was a heck of an accomplishment.
Yeah.
First game, the starting center goes down. Second game, starting center goes down. Third game, I find myself starting. Then I went down 2 games later with a broken hand. But anyway, a realization set in. I came home.
Yeah.
Enrolled at Keene State College to focus on becoming a teacher.
A good experience though there, right? Going away from home, New Hampshire, you're in a football environment that's probably much more structured and like real versus high school.
It was just so much more competitive.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was when I went to Plymouth. That was the biggest thing. It was like, okay, everybody's faster, everybody's a little bit bigger, and everybody's taking this serious. So you have to sort of flip a switch.
Well, so again, my whole approach as a head coach, I would always emphasize to my kids, don't put all your eggs in the football basket.
Yeah.
I would encourage them to go to a school that they wanted to go to if they weren't playing football. Because in all reality, most of them weren't going to play college football.
Yeah.
And
because it's like 1% go on to college. And then, because people think, oh, NFL, it's like less than 1% of the 1% that went to college go to the NFL or play some level of semi-pro or something.
And again, they don't understand. Plymouth State football, Division III.
Yeah.
Good football.
Yeah.
Good football. And it takes good football players to go there. So a lot of kids go there and they get discouraged. They're coming out of high school being the cat's meow.
Thinking they're,
and then they go into their freshman year and they're back down on the scout team.
And there's 120 kids on the roster
and
at the
you
beginning.
You have to be patient and wait your turn.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of kids aren't willing to do that again.
But as you said, though, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You were a pretty good basketball player, too.
Yes, I was. I was a good baskall player.
So were you a point guard or power forward?
Oh, no, I was a shooter. I was a shooter. I'd get the ball and it would go up. So that was back in the day before the three-point line, but I didn't know that. I was shooting with the
no shot clock. But that's another thing, too, right, Coach? I think, at least back when we played, and there's still a lot of athletes that do that at the high school level, but we were 2 or 3 sport athletes for the most part, because it was just, you just transition into the next season. I went straight to hockey after football and then baseball up and through my sophomore year, but there were guys that did all 3.
I think today the incorporation of youth sports club teams has forced a kid to declare early. So if a kid is a softball player, baseball player, hockey player, basketball player, they have to feel they have to play year round and they can't commit. And when I became a head coach, that was one of my first top priorities, was to recruit athletes, and win the other coaches over and encourage them to come out for football. Because if you remember back then, Concord was a hockey school.
Yeah.
And then it was a basketball school.
Yeah.
Matt Bonner put us on
the map there,
of the world. And then Warren Doan, heck of a coach, always had outstanding and competitive teams. So football was kind of, the sport that was bringing up the rear. And to me, the best thing about football was always, it's the only sport, maybe other than track or cross country, where there's no cut and you don't have to have any athletic ability.
Yeah, there's room for everybody, right?
Well, you can't go out for the baseball team today not having played baseball.
Yeah.
And expect to make the team.
Right.
Can't go out for basketball, can't go out for hockey, can't go out for softball. But you can come out for football day one, never having seen a football game.
Yeah.
And if you're patient and, willing to do what you have to do, you can become a good football player in time.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of it, right? Because football is at least from my experience, the one team sport that is physical, there's mental, some guys there's some spiritual element to it, but everybody has a chance to be part of the team. But you have to be a team player
and all 11
you may not get on the field very much.
Oh, for sure.
You might be slime player of the week.
Well,
helping the first team.
And that's the process. Understand, your time will come.
Yeah.
And as a head coach, I tried to, make kids feel that they were going to be given an opportunity, and if they were up to the task, that they would play. But football, when you stand in the huddle and you look at the other 10 guys, they all come from different walks of life, different religions, different athletic ability and all the above. And then all 11 of you have to be in sync to be successful. And it's a fraternity. It's a fraternity that not many people belong to because it's so hard.
Yeah, and it's a pretty tight fraternity too in a lot of ways, because you end up keeping, especially now with social media, you can keep track of all the guys you played with, and year after year. Like I'm going up to Plymouth in a couple weeks to play in the golf tournament with Jason Wimpy, Glenn Matthews, and Chuck Lemerow, who are all Concord guys, and really looking forward to it. But there's something about that shared experience of football that's very tight.
How many times have you been at an event or something and you meet a stranger, and then all of a sudden you get the connection that you both played high school football, and then you start sharing stories, your relationship. Oh, my coach was tougher than your coach.
Yeah.
Well, I remember this
some common.
And as you talk to kids and talk to people, it wasn't all about winning. It was about the experience. It was about the journey. It was about friends and all the above. And I feel football is special. I think it's unique. They play the fewest games of all the teams that compete. It takes you 1 week to get over a loss or enjoy a win. And you put a lot of time and effort. I can remember my wife, God bless her, and I wouldn't have been a football coach if it wasn't for her, because she supported me in every way, shape, or form. And I made a lot of sacrifices with the family that she picked up the slack. But I remember I'd come home from games that we'd lose, and she'd look at me and she'd say, "It's only a game." She says, "Why are you upset?" I said, "Well, it's only a game I put 50 hours preparing for." I said, "It looks like I showed up in the parking lot and said, 'Who wants to play tonight?'" So I said, there's a lot of pride and there's a lot of respect that you try to, win over.
Okay, Coach, so let's go back to, you were in Virginia for a JUCO, right? Junior college.
That's right.
And then where did you go?
Well, from there I came home, and I enrolled at Keene State College to get a teaching degree. And it was at Keene State College, my senior year, that the athletic director, Ted Kerr, implemented a program where students from Keene State could be affiliated with Keene High School and coach various sports and get coaching credit for it. So
like an internship almost.
Exactly, or PG or whatever.
Yeah.
Grad assistant. So he asked me.
Grad assistant sounds more important.
Yeah, for sure. More prestige. So he asked me if I would be interested in coaching at Keene High School, and I jumped at the chance, got credit for it, and worked under Mike Ginolfi.
Now, did you know that you did you know that you kind of had an inkling or a desire to get into coaching, or did that just happen because that opportunity came up?
No, I think in the back of my mind it was something I was going to venture into no matter what. But this opportunity came up, and
That's
you know,
great.
I jumped on it. Gave me experience, gave me an idea of what the commitment would be, and then from there, again, I was married my junior year in college. So
Oh, okay.
when we left Keene, came to Manchester because I got a teaching job in Derry, and I bumped into an old friend of mine who was coaching Potman football. I need help. Could you give me a hand? So I worked with him, Wake Stillman, North Warriors, and so we did that for a year.
So what time frame was this roughly?
Oh, God, that was
Late
1973.
73, okay.
So from there, I lived up on Lowell Street by Deerfield Park, and my wife and I would take the baby for walks around the park, and one day I'm out there watching Trinity High School practice football. And
Okay.
I walked up to the head coach and said, geez, would you be willing to take on a volunteer assistant? Kenny Shacker was his name, my mentor.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Jumped at the chance, and I got involved with Ken. I coached with Ken at Trinity for 2 years, 74, 75. Went to the championship 75, lost to Salem. From there, we went to Memorial for 4 years.
Yeah.
From Memorial, we went to Salem for 8 years.
Okay.
And then it was at Salem.
So did you still live in Manchester area though, or Concord,
all
Hooksett?
those years, yeah. I moved to Hooksett, I want to say, in 76. So we moved to Hooksett, but still I was teaching in Derry, coaching in Manchester, coaching in Salem. And then Jack Gaddy was a good friend of mine. He was the head coach at Trinity, and he applied for the coaching job at Concord High. And
right. So,
I thought, you know, if I could teach and coach in the same community, it would be less traveling, less stress on the family and whatnot. So I applied for a teaching job in Concord, got it. Jack hired me as an assistant coach. I was his assistant coach for 8 years, and then when he took the job in Salem in 1994, I became the head coach at Concord.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the assistant coach experience. You know, you're not the head coach. You don't quite have all the responsibility. You don't take all the heat.
Assistant coaches make suggestions. Head coaches make decisions.
I heard that assistant coaches get credit when you win, and if you lose, the head coach takes the heat.
Well, I think my philosophy was when you win, it's on the kids. When you lose, it's on you.
Yeah.
And you know, being an assistant coach was a different hat. You had a role. I was the line coach offensively and defensively.
Yeah.
I called the defense.
And you know, because I played for you and Coach Gaddy back in the 80s, 86, 87, 88, those falls of those years. And you were a big part of, you know, us being part of a 3 years in a row going to a state championship in a pretty short order with not, you know, the greatest amount of talent. We had talent, but we didn't have like Nashua talent when they were just one Nashua high school or Pinkerton.
We pretty much worked with kids who had a big heart, right, and had a want to, and Jack's offense was conducive to what we were trying to do, and it you know, we might have a 170-pound tackle, but the fact that we're double teaming every play with the 170-pound tackle and 160-pound guard on the 280-pound tackle. Right? But it was a great offense. It was effective.
Finesse. Very controlled. But I remember too, were you the defensive coordinator in a lot of ways? Because
it was Jack's defense. It was Jack's defense. We ran the 40, the same 40 that Ken Shacker taught us. It was a reading 40. It was a very detailed 40, if you recall. And everybody had their reads, their keys, and what they had to do and their responsibilities. I called the defense, but as the head coach, Jack would monitor it. Okay, stay out of that. Let's do this. Can't do that. You know, and that's what a head coach does. You know, he gives authority, but yet he's going to make the final decision on what to do. But I got the experience of calling the defense quickly, getting it in, and you know,
understanding down and distance, the other team.
That whole thing that I think a lot of head coaches today are unaware. All right. The intangibles that go with being a head coach, people aren't aware of until they become a head coach. Something simple like passing out equipment. Something simple like having meetings. Something simple like weight training year round. You're the only one in the weight room.
Working with the boosters if you're lucky enough to have boosters.
So
dealing with parents that might email you now these days, and the AD, right?
Exactly.
All those things.
Just the accountability.
You're like a CEO
and the responsibility and disciplinarian and parent and all the above. So it's a lot of hats, and it can be very demanding.
Well, what I remember a lot of back then was just how I thought we had a really great coaching staff for those years when I was in high school, and a lot of younger guys, Donnie Poitras, it seemed like you guys really clicked well together.
We were friends. We were friends that coached together.
Yeah,
and that was a big. And there were no egos on that team. There was no aspiration. Nobody trying to second guess the head coach. I mean, Jack had a plan. We followed his plan. We'd make suggestions. Sometimes he'd listen. Sometimes he wouldn't. As far as what he wanted to do, which was fine. And but I
very
think,
disciplined.
I think for sure. And I think that as a coach, you have to surround yourself with different personalities. You've got to have the enforcer. You got to have the tough, loud guy. You got to have have
good cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad for sure. For sure.
Hello. But I'm glad you said that, because I've been helping coach out at Pembroke Academy a little bit, and we have a little bit of that dynamic there too. But the players,
they identify with different coaches.
Yeah, they do.
Not only their position
They'll
coach.
come up.
You had the coach who was probably more friendly with people than than other coaches.
Than others, because they had to be stern and get things done.
Exactly. So every coach has their role.
Yeah.
Every player can identify with one of the coaches on the staff. No matter what type of person they are. There's generally, so you need to be smart as far as the coaches
you're giving
hire.
feedback to the head coach about, hey, this kid's dealing with this, and you kind of get to know him a little bit more.
A good head coach should oversee that anyway. You see it happening.
Yeah.
I mean, you monitor, you see, you can observe, you see the kid every day. You see him out of sync someday, you walk up, hey, what's happening?
He's got girlfriend issues
exactly.
or something.
And things you don't really know about, family issues, school issues. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into.
Well, I was, Jason Caparello, Cap.
The best.
Good friends, best friends to this day. We talk a lot of football. We talk almost every Friday on the phone. But I always tell him, it was funny watching some of our games, on the video, and just the amount of discipline we had as a team back then seemed really high. Like during a defensive timeout, you would be coming out on the field after talking to Coach Gaddy, and it would be hands on knees in the front row, hands on hips in the second row. Nobody was talking. Nobody.
No.
And it seems like these days now everybody's talking, and they're even talking to the ref sometimes.
Different game,
But that was, to me, that was like, okay, you guys instilled in us, like, hey, you don't talk, you listen to the coach, you do what you're told, and success will come if you work hard at it and work.
It all comes down to one word, Peach: respect. Respect your teammates, respect your opponent, respect your coaches, respect the officials. I mean, we emphasize sportsmanship. We emphasize keep your mouth shut. If you're going to say something, make it positive to your teammate or to the opponent, But it's all about respect. Nothing gets done if you're talking trash and, antagonizing or motivating the other team to play harder.
And I'm not going to say we were a bunch of angels either, though, because we had some rugged, tough kids on the team, and some had rougher home lives and things like that. But you guys were able to pull us all together, which was really pretty fascinating, because I think that helped us in the long run. And I think about things like football camp at Camp Mytina and stuff, and some of the shenanigans that would happen, and you at times seemed like the bad cop of the good cop. I distinctly remember you once. It was pretty loud in our cabin, and it was too late at night, and you came flying up, and it said something to the effect of, "You're so full of piss and vinegar now, you won't be at 6:30 in the morning." It was, and then everybody was like, that was it.
Well,
there wasn't even a whisper after you walked away. It was like, okay, coach has made his point. But that was good, because I think young guys need structure. Young guys need role models. They need someone. And looking back now, like, I know your intent was to make us better. You weren't just yelling for the sake of yelling to be a jerk or anything like that. It was.
As one of my
we were out of
former
line.
players said, if he's not yelling at me, he doesn't care.
Yeah,
the minute he doesn't, address you or do something,
Yeah.
then you're off the chart, and that's not a good thing.
Okay, so the discipline side, structure, all those things seem to work really well for us. And I was joking around about yelling and stuff, but that's really coaching in a lot of ways.
We call that coaching with passion.
And
Teach.
sometimes, yeah, when you're, and I'm starting to realize this more now because I've been trying to help out at the high school level. In order to get people's attention and to herd cats, you have to yell. You have to have the volume.
You have to raise your voice, and people look at the tone, and they're not listening to the context.
Yeah.
He's yelling. Well, he's yelling 60 yards across the field to tell his defensive end to step down, deliver the inside forearm, and play off the block.
Right.
He's not berating the kid. He's telling him what to do.
Yeah.
And coach and kids would say, well, he's yelling. No, he's not yelling. He's coaching with passion.
And did you find that changed over the years, where a lot of things that maybe we were able to do back then, you may not be able to do these days?
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's a different time. And I can tell you, as an assistant coach, as a line coach, as an aggressive, passionate coach,
yes,
I had, an image in people's eyes. And when I became a head coach, I had to change hats.
Yeah.
And, I had to become the head coach who oversaw things and had to, deal with his coaches. And like I said, have different personalities and whatnot. And I had to change, my persona changed as a head coach from an assistant coach.
So let's talk about that. Your transition from assistant coach at Concord, you said Coach Gaddy moved on to Salem, and you got the head coaching job here in Concord. So let's talk about that experience.
I was fortunate to have coached under two great head coaches. I mean, Ken Shacker taught me the X's and O's and the reading defense and wing T offense, and Jack, was, like you said, disciplined, organized, and prepared. And, I learned a lot from both of them, which I utilized when I became a head coach. But like I said, my image had to change because now I was the leader and I was in charge, and I had to be the person that would put out fires and, deal with problems and issues. And like you said, all the other intangibles, booster club and equipment and raising money and all the above, things that I was, somewhat aware of, but not totally involved with.
And not the decision maker or the final word on a lot of those things.
For sure. So I had to take a step back. I had to compromise. I had to relinquish authority to give the coaches.
Delegate.
I think that's important as a head coach, is that you let your assistant coaches coach.
Yep.
And you can, advise and ask them or tell them what you want. But you got to give them the responsibility to develop the relationship with their kids, their position players, so that those players can trust them.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, they will support what you're doing, and
it comes all together.
It all comes together on game day for sure.
So with that transition too, now, did you make any changes to like the type of defense or offense you ran? Because now you're the guy who gets to do that.
Defensively, not so much. All right, we still played a reading 40, and we broke our practices down where, the session we'd have offensive day, defensive day. We didn't do both together, other than on the last day of the week, which we reviewed. But kids would break up. The defensive tackles would go with their coach. Defensive ends would go with their coach. Outside backers go with their coach. Inside backers go with their coach. Defensive backs go to their coach. And then as a head coach, you walk around, you monitor, you see, you observe, you add, and all the above. And then you come together as a group.
For team.
For you put in your game plan.
Yep.
And show the formations, what we're going to do, how we're going to adjust, and all the above. And then we go team and we run plays. And
so with that you kept pretty much the same defense, things you knew. Were you a big, I remember when I played, it was defense wins championships, right? Like you keep the other team off the scoreboard, you got a pretty good chance of winning.
I can honestly say that probably out of 100% of preparation, 60 to 70% was on defense.
Yeah.
The amount of time. I mean, we worked on offense, obviously.
Right.
But
you can get that down.
We'd always maybe end up in offensive practice with a defensive review for the last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
But defense obviously was important. If they don't score, then you have a shot.
Yeah, and that changed a little bit after the 80s. Into the 90s, it started to see a lot more spread, had to prepare in a different way.
Whole different way. I'm kind of fortunate I wasn't involved in that transition period.
Okay.
I was back in the Stone Age where we ran the ball and,
Right.
But now it's pitch and catch. Scores are crazy. People throwing, passes in the fourth quarter when they're up 60-0. I mean, it's a different mindset. And again, it all comes back down to the respect.
So you're the head coach at Concord High. Let's talk a little bit about your time there and how you guys did. And
well, I was there 15 years. We had 10 winning seasons, my first and last, and then 8 in a row in the middle. We went to 3 championship games, won 1, lost 2, got beaten overtime.
Was that the 3-0?
That was a 3-0 game.
3-0 game.
We played Central at Gill Stadium.
In the wind.
Oh, it was brutal. It was
no
brutal.
one could run. It was the most boring.
Well, I woke up that day and I said, awesome. Because they'd beaten us handily during the regular season.
Yeah.
And I remember one time we punted the ball went over the line of scrimmage, went back behind the punter.
Right. And it ended up 3-0.
And Central was a much better team than we were. They just had
they
better
were a
athletes
pretty good dynasty around
exactly.
that time.
And
a lot of great athletes.
We were in a position to win that game and we almost did.
Yeah.
But
and
I was
it was
proud
cold.
of that team. Overachievers for sure.
But and you had the championship team, 2000?
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the year I helped the freshmen with you, and I appreciate you giving me that opportunity because that was one of those things like I just called you, hey, you need some help? Sure, you work with the freshmen,
Never
D-backs.
turn away an alumni.
And stuff. It's good. Or an extra set of hands on the field, right?
That's for sure. That's for sure.
But that team, I remember that because I was around and paying attention, and I had to drop out of football for a little while. I had kids right at that time too, but that was a really good team.
That was a team that earned their spurs. That was a team that predominantly most of the seniors started as sophomores. Yeah. And then we were...
So they were 3-year starters.
3-year starters for the most part.
And you had a really good quarterback.
We were veterans. We had a good...
Matt Scobie.
We had people that could throw. We had people that could catch. We had people that could run. And we had good size up front.
DJ Proul.
We played great D. I mean, it's just one of those years. Coach Brown enjoyed one of those years in 2013 where you had the right people and, things went well. So a memorable team for sure.
And I think you maybe had one loss that year, and then against Londonderry, and then you beat them in the final.
We got beat handily during the regular season. I think they beat us 33-6 down there.
Yep.
And then they came up here, and we beat them, I think, 56-6.
Yeah.
I have to credit Peter Bergeron at that game because we implemented cover 2 that week.
Oh, really?
Something we'd never done.
Right.
And Peter installed that. And,
so then you had 2 coverages.
We had 3. Cover 1, cover 2, cover 3. We had others in the book which we never used.
Like if you get into 3 coverages or 4, kids their eyes start going, what's my job on this one, Coach?
You don't want to confuse.
I got 4 different things.
We had all we could do to rotate up or go deep out.
But that's a good thing. That's a good point for a lot of high school coaches because
keep it simple.
You got to keep it simple. If you have too many if-then scenarios, like if they do this, then you got to do that, kids start losing it after about 3 of them because they just can't keep track of it.
You spoon feed them. You put in your base and you do it well and repetition. Yeah. I can remember sitting in the stands scouting a game. Exeter was beating up on somebody. And the Exeter people were insane because Coach Ball wasn't throwing the ball.
Yeah.
And I said, excuse me, I said, why are you so upset? Oh, that's all we do is run the ball. I says, yeah, to the tune of 40, 50 points a game. I says, you got to be
300 yards on the ground. And
I said, really? So,
well, that's the thing too, right? Because to the average fan or someone who doesn't understand the intricacies or the chess match that's actually going on the field, it can look like, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? But now that I've been coaching a little bit, you start understanding a little. There's a lot going on every play, and you got 25, 30 seconds to make the next call.
If that,
and you're
good
planning,
coach is 2 plays ahead.
Yeah,
you know what you're doing. Second and long, second and short, third and long, third and short.
And there's a lot of like, hey, if we control the ball, they don't get the ball. We can keep the score down. We can manage this game better. It's not wide open, take chances every play, which people think like, why don't they throw the bomb? It's like because it's a high risk play. If you do a 3 and out, you only take 30 seconds off the clock.
And then that's another thing too. You need to understand the situation. All right. I mean, I can remember playing in some games where we'd be playing a team, not a good opponent, and First series, they get the ball, they throw a pick six.
Yeah.
All right, we kick off to them. Next series, they get the ball, they run the ball, they throw another interception. We punch it in quickly.
Yeah.
Next time they get the ball, they throw another pick. Now we're
Now
6
they're
minutes into
desperate.
the game. We're
Yeah.
21-0 ahead.
Yeah.
We've run maybe 5 plays from the offense.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to back off now? You know?
Yeah.
And that's
Just
an
gonna
issue.
have to run
You know,
trap
I mean,
and
well,
off tackle and
You know, I mean,
be respectful in the long run.
exactly. You know,
Yeah.
you don't want to upset people.
'Cause-
You don't want to embarrass kids.
Yeah.
You don't want to,
Right.
you know, run up a high score against a group of kids that it's not their fault if they're not prepared, because
Yeah.
there are teams you play that aren't as prepared as others. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's,
And what I'm finding out by doing this series of talking to coaches, you guys all know each other.
well, we
off
did.
the field.
We did. Now, that's a good point today.
So you're not going to do it to your friend. You're not
Well,
going to, when you know a guy's having an off season.
You're not even going to do it to a non-friend. You should. You should.
Right,
You know,
that's
because
true.
it comes
Good-
back and
good
bites
coaching
you.
point, Coach.
It comes back and bites you.
It does, right?
I think today, one of the biggest differences I see in high school football today compared to when I coached 15, 20 years ago is that, you're right, the fraternity of coaches. Back when we coached, we'd scout in person. We'd go Friday
Yeah.
night if we weren't playing. We'd go Saturday afternoon if we weren't playing.
Players went too.
And we stood in the end zone and we'd
Talk.
kibitz with the other coaches. Well, what'd you
Yeah.
do? How'd you do against them? What'd you do this? And people would share their ideas and they'd share their films.
Right.
And you became friends. You know, hey, Bob, I'm playing Spalding next
Yeah.
week. Can I have your film? Sure, no problem. You know,
Yeah.
it was an open door policy and everybody knew, everybody was giving everybody else their films.
Yep.
Today, not many coaches, not many. I can think of 1 or 2 that I'll go to a game and I'll see standing in the end zone, old school, writing down stuff, looking
Yeah.
at people. And I always thought it was important to go to a game, not so much necessarily see what a team does, but to see how they do it and who they do it with. Standing in the end zone, looking at a huddle of your opponent and seeing how they interact, seeing how the coaches,
Yeah.
seeing how the kids respond to coaches, you know?
Yep.
That tells you a lot
You
about
can-
the type of kid, the character of the team, and all the above.
Because what you're seeing on live in person is in between plays, right?
Just seeing plays.
So you see the kid who has his head down, or you see the kid who's maybe the guy that's pulling the
Disruptive,
team
not
together,
listening
or-
to the coach, talking back to the coach.
So
I mean,
then
these
you
types
know,
of
like,
things.
okay, let's
Well,
maybe target this kid in
This
terms
kid-
of let's go after him because
this
he's
kid
going to
could
take
be
himself
easier
out
to
of the game.
upset, for sure.
Yeah.
So
And that's interesting because I was telling with Coach Gaddy, I remember going to like Keene and other places with Jason Wimpy, Kevin Kimball, Darren Siebel. We were scouting because we were playing them next week.
No better feeling.
Gave us something to do.
No better feeling than winning on Friday night, than putting your jacket on Saturday afternoon and going to the opponent
Yep.
of your next game.
Right.
And
if you go to Spalding, you can stand right on the sideline.
there
and
you go. No,
You go bowling.
you could be. There's something to be said for that. You know.
There
Yeah,
is.
You're right.
That goes to that camaraderie, that tradition. That's like
Exactly.
you get to know guys,
Yep,
right? And
yep,
you
yep.
get to
and
see.
you respect them. And then, like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
You played in the Shrine game. I coached it 7 times.
Yeah.
When the kids got together and people you hated, all right,
Yeah.
because of the rivalry, and then you become
Suddenly you're
best
a
of friends, you know, and you would,
Yeah.
you know, and I used to love doing it because I'd go into the dorm rooms at night of different kids, and we'd talk, and, you know,
Yeah.
every kid thinks,
Because they didn't have cell phones too
No,
half
no,
the time,
no.
right? And
every kid thinks their program is the same as everybody else's.
Yeah.
So I used to love to go in and pick their brains. Well, how do you
Right.
guys do this? How do you guys do that?
Right. Because I remember those guys I played with, Aaron Scribner, and because Scribner played for Coach
Levine at West.
Levine at West.
Yep.
Yeah, great guy.
Yep.
Pat Goslin.
Yep.
These guys, that, like you said, on the field when we played, they were like the arch enemies, right?
Exactly.
And then suddenly I'm like, oh, he's kind of like me.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he just loves playing football. And Rob Milanetti from Milford, we had a really good team. Rod McCory. And that's where Coach Ball was an assistant coach that year. And that's where I really, you know, seeing him as a young guy, and he had a lot of energy.
Yeah, yeah.
But I liked it. I
Yeah.
kind of was attracted to it because it was like, I kind of dig this guy. He's passionate. He's like really, and that was sort of me in high school and in college where I just had to let stuff out.
Sure.
To get that energy out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I love playing defense
Well,
because it
sure.
allowed me to sort of unleash that in a very different way than playing quarterback in the T. Where it was like, you have to be precise.
Oh.
There's no rah-rah
Discipline.
about
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
You
Gotta
got
be in
3
control,
yards,
gotta know what you're doing.
victory.
Yeah. It's the plan, 3.5.
But that's good. It's fascinating that you did that because, so you coached the Shrine game how many times?
7.
And Chad too, right?
I did Chad, yep, did once.
I heard they pulled you out of retirement to do the Chad game.
They
Is
did.
that true?
They did.
You and who was the other coach?
Coach Hubert.
Yeah.
Coach
so you
Hubert.
guys were both retired.
Yeah, yeah.
Both Central guys.
He beat me in overtime again.
Of course, you remember that,
Sure.
right? But that's interesting. So, folks, the Chad game is a charity game, right? And
Charity game, Children's Hospital at Dartmouth. Nick Bayless was the originator of that, and it's a whole different setup than the Shrine game.
Yep.
The Chad game, kids go to practice from their cars at night to a specific facility. They come for 2 hours and go back home. And they do that for a week, and then they play the game.
It's east-west. East New Hampshire was
Yes,
west.
yes. Where the Shrine experience is you go up for 7 to 10 days. You're there in a dorm. You get to interact. You have double sessions. You have films. You get to, swim and do all the things and whatnot. It was a great experience. I enjoyed it. I did it with good friends who were head coaches: Tommy Dobney, Ken Shaka, Jack Gaddy. Got involved with Brian O'Reilly. We had one year we did the team, I think it was 2010, where we had 7 head coaches on the staff.
Yeah, like an all-star team.
I can remember. I remember.
Maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, but I'm sure you guys had a blast.
It was amusing. I can remember walking out to practice one day. The head coach, Ken Shaka, turns around to me and says, "Bob, get the balls." I turn around to Tom, get the balls. Tom turned around and said, "Get the ball." Whoever was listening, I had to get the balls.
Because there's no low man on the totem pole.
But you know
assistant
what?
guy.
No.
You're all head coaches. Who's going to carry the balls?
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
But you know what? It was fun. I mean, we just go in the dorm room at night and we'd sit there and talk football and share stories, and you get 7 different programs, and it was fun. I enjoyed it.
I mean, so back to so you coached the Shrine game.
Yeah.
And you were part of at least one Chad game too.
I was the head coach of the Chad team.
Any different experience with that in terms of how do you have 2 weeks, right, to prep for a game?
Well, like I said,
Keep
Chad,
it simple.
You had the kids up
athletes.
there. You could implement a lot more.
Yeah.
With the Chad game, it was right at the end of the school year. So when you had practice at night from 4 to 6:30, you may be missing 4 or 5 kids for various reasons, visiting colleges, playing baseball games. So I can honestly say, I'm not sure if I ever had both my starting teams there at the same time.
Right.
So your execution and your precision on game day at the Chad is going to be a little less than it would be at Shrine, because the Shrine team
it's dedicated.
has more time. You have more time. They're with you for a week.
Yeah.
A kid can't miss practice because he's there.
He's there. You're in dorms. We were up at Plymouth State.
Yep.
And it was great. It was like triple sessions, a little lighter in terms of the energy level, but you had time with them, and then at night you had all this stuff.
Yeah, preparation.
And that's always, it was intriguing to me because for a coach, it's like taking 2 weeks out of your summer away.
It was
and you're
Christmas.
prepping, and it's
Christmas.
okay, so
It was Christmas.
so that goes back to behind every good head coach there's a better wife.
And you know what?
Who's tolerant.
God bless them because they let us do it. I mean, I can remember my wife saying,
all seriousness,
"You're going away for how long?"
Right.
She's got 2 kids, toddlers. But
well, that Shrine game experience is good too for the players because you go down to the Shriners Hospital in Massachusetts and do a day trip. At least we did, and that really opened my eyes to my life's pretty good.
while you're playing the game.
Yeah, my life's pretty good. These kids are having real
When you're
issues,
17, 18
life-threatening.
years old, that doesn't figure in yet.
Yeah,
But
your world's pretty small at that point.
For
and
sure.
That certainly widened the lens for me. And it was just a great experience, playing up at Dartmouth.
Yep.
It was back then the only show in town, so we got a really good crowd to it. It was probably 10, 15,000 people.
My biggest concern with the All-Star games today is that the Chad game has 88 kids playing it, 44 in each team, I think is the roster. And the Shriners Board, which is predominantly, if not all, Vermont people who work really hard, do a great job raising money and doing all the work, pretty much set the standard and the rules as far as who can participate. Well, back prior to the Chad game, we could pick so many kids from each division, and we'd be able to fill a roster. We couldn't pick more than 8 or 9 from Division 1, or 8 or 9 Division II, and then 5 or 6. I think our roster was 25, maybe 30 kids. And today, there's a rule that's implemented for the Shrine game, is that if a kid plays in a Chad game, he can't play in the Shrine game.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you look at the number of seniors that play high school football in New Hampshire, and you take away 88 of them, and now you're left over what's
so
left.
It's almost like the Chad gets the cream of the crop.
Well, the kid has a choice of both schools, but more often kids are going to say, what, I go away for a week and have practice 3 times a day, or I stay home and I can practice 2 hours
at night
a day,
and do my summer job
so,
or whatever too.
You know, more kids opt out to play in a Chad game. And I give New Hampshire credit because they've been very competitive. They won a couple games. They've lost some close ones. Jimmy Corkum, Concord coach this year, is coaching a Shrine game. So, you know, that gives you a little
want to talk to
perspective
him at some point.
For sure.
So let's get back to that then. So you've coached the All-Star games. What was your last year at Concord High, and what was that decision like for you to step away from the game?
I retired from teaching in 2007. I retired from coaching in 2008. So that meant 2008 I was at home and sitting in my lounge chair out in the patio, and then I look at my watch and say, I got to go to practice. All right. It was one thing to go from school to practice. It was another thing to go from home to practice. But I'd done it for 37 years. I retired. I had grandchildren now. They're starting to figure into play, and I wanted to be a part of their lives. And to be honest with you, I didn't want to do to my grandchildren what I did to my children, is sacrifice and miss things. And so I decided,
because there is a sacrifice to be a coach, and a lot of the coaches are working the local school systems too. But there's pros and cons, right? There's a lot of good that comes out of it, but there is definitely I'm going to miss some stuff.
There's a disadvantage, I feel, for a coach to be out of the school system. They don't get to see the kids as much as they could. They don't get to monitor what they're doing off the football field as much. I think it's important that they understand what the criteria and the expectations are of the school as far as athletic contracts and accountability and what they have to do. I think that coaches who teach within a school are more in tune with the AD and what the expectations are and punishments. They're consistent with rule breaking, where outside people come in and don't really have an identity with the school or with the expectations or with the teachers. I mean, when you're in school, you can go to a teacher whose kid is having an issue with, not so much if you're working someplace else. So there's definitely a disadvantage and obviously an advantage. But today there are so many fewer coaches, so many fewer candidates. I mean, I'm sure you're experiencing it at Pembroke, trying to find people that want to get involved and put in the time. And unfortunately today, kids are willing to coach, but not willing to commit to the amount of time they have to do.
They don't realize
I can't go say to coach, I'm going to homecoming.
And I'm and I'm part of that too, because I work a full-time job, and it was hard. The stress level would build as day goes on. Of am I going to be able to get out of time to go to practice?
You felt guilty if you didn't get there.
And then because I was a defensive coordinator this past year, I had to watch film. I'm like up at 10 o'clock at night breaking down stuff, and I didn't quite understand the total commitment because I really wanted to try to make sure
those kids. Looks great on the sideline to stand there in the stands and say, well, they should be doing this.
Exactly.
I never had a parent,
whole different level of appreciation.
I had a parent come up to me and say, Coach, says you were really effective running that play in the first half. Why'd you stop running it in the second half? I said, well, I don't know if you noticed, but the kid running the ball got hurt. And we did try to run the same play. It just wasn't as effective.
Right. And the other team's making adjustments at halftime too, right? Like you understand that. But how was that then? So you made a decision heading into that last season that you were all done that year. So you knew, like,
I didn't know prior to.
Okay.
As the course of the year went on, I said to myself, I'm not doing justice. I'm putting in work. It's not as much fun as it used to be. I don't enjoy it. I was putting in a lot of time, and I said, if I'm going to take part in my grandkids' activities and whatnot, I can't continue to do this. So it was the right time. I mean, I'd done it 37 years. It was time to walk away.
So, and how many years as a head coach?
15.
15. Yep. And one title, 3 state championship games you were in.
Yeah. As a coach overall, I was in 10.
Yep.
We, as an assistant, I was in 7. I was with 2 with Coach Shack, 3 with Coach Shacker, 3 with Coach Gaddy, 4 with Coach Shacker, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And so, you know, we had a good experience.
And it's a lot, right? Like, so as I was prepping for this, Coach, I talked to Jason Caparello, told him I was going to be talking to you, and he told me a story of you when he redid your hardwood floors. He's sanding, because that's what his business was for quite a while. He said he got done doing the actual sanding. The next morning, he shows up to put the first coat of polyurethane down, and you're sitting in the middle of the room in like a lawn chair with a TV in front of you, breaking down tape. And he's like, Coach, what are you doing? I got to put this poly down. So it was just hilarious. I said, Cap, I can totally picture that too. But that's what coaches do, right?
That's what you did.
You got some free time, you're going to break down film, you're going to study.
When you look at your week, people, and again, no one has a concept. Like I said, my wife, it's only a game. No. I said, okay, typical week, all right? Friday night we play the game, win or lose. I go home, all right? I look at the film, quick look, all right? Next morning I'm up,
Looks fresh.
all right? I'm running around the state, going to get film and trying to get, then I come home, make copies for my assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Saturday afternoon, we either play or I go scout a game, break down film Saturday night. Assistant coaches come over Sunday morning for a staff meeting. We look at our film, we break it down.
Plan for the week.
We break it down as far as the awards, decals, all the above. All right, we look at our opponents. All right, this is what they do. How are we going to do it? What's our personnel? What's our alignment? So we have that team meeting on Sunday. They go home.
Yeah.
I take a break. I watch football from 1 to 3. All right. NFL's over at 4 o'clock. Well, it's not as stressful.
Yeah,
football,
yeah, exactly.
You know? I'm not charting anything. So then at night, I pop the films in and we start looking at film. Monday morning, we go to practice. JVs have their game. Varsity goes down. We look at the game film, break it down.
The JVs.
Sometimes it's an hour. Sometimes it's 2.5 hours.
Right.
We go do a lift. We go outside, do our run. We go over our game plan for the week. Have practice Tuesday, defense, go over everything. Have practice Wednesday. Practice starts at 3 o'clock. I get home at 7:30 because I'm the first one in, last one out. Friday, you play your game. So it's ongoing, 7 days a week.
It's a dedicated thing. And you know, that's back in the day too, when we didn't have Huddle online. You didn't have automatic access to the game film within hours.
Everything was what the coach did.
You had to go track people down, right?
Had to
and then
track
hope
them
the
down.
film was actually good.
Exactly. Well, I can't tell you how many times I got home and look in the canister and it's the wrong film. And I call up the guy, Jesus, you know, really?
This is last year's game.
You know, trust me, that's happened. You know? Or it was against, you know.
I wouldn't doubt it, Coach.
There were some people I cringed in exchanging film because I wasn't sure what I was going to get.
Yeah.
But no, it was different back then. Now you get Huddle, which is good, but it's too small. I mean, you look at the computer screen. I mean, I'm old school. I mean, I go back to 16 millimeter film.
Right. Right. All right, Coach. So as we wrap up here today, you know, what are the things that you would tell a young high school kid, maybe coming into his freshman year of high school, and then also what would you tell a young coach or a young man who wants to get into coaching, or woman, and then what would you hope that your legacy is as you reflect on your time, you know, working with kids, playing football? As we talked about, it's not all about X's and O's and wins and losses. It's about these guys, right? You're trying to impart things into their lives, and hopefully they turn out to be good citizens of this world. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, for a young player coming out, as we mentioned before, you can be somebody that's never played the game before. But if you're patient, give it time, and be visible. I think for a young man coming out, I think it's important to be visible. And what do I mean by being visible? When you're out to practice and coach calls for somebody or something, sprint. I see that. I see you moving ahead of the other people.
Yeah.
All right, coach calls for a body. I need a tackle. I need a back, whatnot. Even though you're not that position, jump out there. So the coach says, no, I don't need a 240-pound safety. All right, go back to the sideline. Be visible, you know. Put in your best effort, you know. If you're struggling, and if you're a player that's never played football before, you're in for a real shock when you get out to your first practice in August, you know, August 22nd, it's 90 degrees out. You're out there in full pads, and you're thinking to yourself, why am I here? All right? I think it's important that you learn to identify on the team who the people that will lead you, you know? Get next to a veteran, you know, because if they can do it, you can do it. And you know, and you would want as a coach to encourage your veterans to help the younger people and carry them along and introduce them to the game.
Yeah.
I think it's important that you give it a fair shot.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many kids I coached who came out as seniors
Yeah.
and said, geez, I wished I'd done this earlier.
Yeah,
I wished I'd done this my freshman year. But better to have done it 1 year than no years. My suggestion is go out as a freshman. Find out if you like it. Football is not for everybody. And there's nothing wrong with coming out and saying, you know what, it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand it. But I think it's important that you come out, you give it a fair shot, be visible, learn, listen. I can remember telling my kids, when I'm coaching a defensive end, I'm not coaching him. I'm coaching all the defensive ends.
Right.
So if you're standing over there and I'm coaching him on how to do something, and then you get your shot to get in there with the group and you know what you're doing, that stands out. I know you're listening. I know you're over there.
Right.
So listen.
Yeah.
Be visible. Work hard. And identify with a leader to get you through. And then once you become a leader, carry somebody else through.
Right, right. And resilience, and don't be afraid to fail.
Oh.
Right? Because you're gonna. It's new. It's at a different level. And I think, sometimes
transition. Don't expect to be the best player in the team day one. I mean,
it's hard work.
It all goes back to patience. I mean, and you know as well as anybody, all right, program players. You have your stars, and then you have the people you need, all right, that have been in the system, have been in the program, have been patient, and have finally, as a senior year, get an opportunity to be a starter, all right? And if you do your work your first 3 years, you're going to be successful.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, looking back, and again, time gives you perspective, right? I have a lot of respect for the guys that didn't get a lot of playing time because they worked their tail off for not a lot of recognition.
What's rougher than being a card team player? Getting the pudding slapped out of them every day. Takes a special kid. And again, as a young player, jump on the card team. Because if I see you do something there, it's going to elevate you in my eyes as far as being a varsity contributor.
Right, right.
As a young coach getting in the game, be aware of what you're working with. Be aware of what coaching consists of. Like we talked about earlier, people become a head coach and they have no idea of all their responsibilities as far as academics, as far as boost the club, as far as community, as far as being a good role model for your kids, and be there. Don't try to fool them; they can see through you. Don't
be authentic.
Don't. Yes, exactly. Be confident in what you're doing. Don't jump on the new phase. Know your personnel, know what they can do, and try to adapt your scheme to what you can do as opposed to what you want to do and can't do. Be fair. Be fair. I think it's also important as a coach, every kid needs to understand or know that he'll be given an opportunity. Every now and then, I would take that third string kid and put him in with the first group. A, to test to see if he knows what he's doing, and B, to give him a carrot, and oftentimes just working with that group that one day will motivate him and give him a whole different outlook that week, for sure. So,
because we have to remember, these are young guys who are trying to just grow into young men.
For sure. Oh,
and they got a lot of questions about, what they're going to be, how tough are they, can they take the physical side, can they pick up the mental side of football, which is probably the hardest part, really.
Each and every day after practice, we'd all come in and take a knee. It was, quick, hey, today's practice went this way, that way, whatever. And then I would preach to them about being a good citizen, a good person, emphasizing they live in a fishbowl. People are looking at them from far away and judging them. And it's what you do and how you do, how people are going to evaluate it. We can't tell people we're special. We don't stand out about everybody else. But guess what? We do. Because we're working a heck of a lot harder than the rest of the student body. You're special, but you can't act like you're special.
Right.
And treat people with respect, and they'll treat you with respect, whether it's your opponent, whether it's your teammate, whether it's your classmate, your teachers, all the above. Because those skills will help you down the road.
Yeah, they're life skills.
For sure.
They translate right into your work life and showing up on time, working hard, paying attention, so you know how to do your job.
Doing something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Being told what to do. Everybody has a boss.
It's not about
one of the funniest things is
the pursuit of happiness. It's not you get to be happy every day, but that's okay, right? Because that's life. Life has ups and downs. I think that football is one of those sports where, like you said early on, once a week you go to battle and you know where you stand, and especially as a young man, there's no hiding it when you've been out on the football field, right? The crowd saw everything.
Yeah, you know.
But that takes courage.
And own
too.
it, own it.
Yeah.
You know, you screwed up. Hey, it's all right. You're gonna screw up. I can
learn a
remember
lot.
when the kids would come over for films on Thursday night. You know, weekly tradition. Kids would have their family or their team dinner, and then they'd come to my house for looking at films, just a rewrap of everything we've done. And my wife would bake cookies and make apple crisp and dish out ice cream and all the above and everything. And I can remember being there, and she'd be snapping at me, do this, do that, do this. And the kids are looking at me, and they go, hey, guys. I go, she's the head coach here. I says, I do what I'm told.
Right,
you
right.
Know? So it gave me perspective.
So you were role modeling it.
You know, get married, just do what you're told.
But that's good though, right? Because they saw you in a different environment.
For sure.
They saw like, hey, he's not just the head coach who has to.
Everybody answers to whatever he says.
Right.
No,
Says
down
how
here,
high.
I'm the assistant freshman coach in the household.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good. And those are good memories too, you know?
They were.
I have fond memories of those now.
I can remember kids saying to me, Coach, you know what inspired me to become a starter was to come to your house on Thursday night.
Yeah. Right. I get to go to Coach's house.
There you go. So
it's the little things. But, you know, let's wrap up with, you know, your legacy. Like, you coached for a long time, and, you know, if I've learned anything, Coach, coaching is about touching kids in terms of helping them build life skills. It isn't just about the X's and O's. And, you know, you had a long storied career. As you know, I know a lot of coaches don't like to boast, but you had a good career coaching, and your name is pretty well known around this state for that. But what do you hope your legacy is at the end of the day? You know, what do you hope people say when your name comes up?
I'd like to think that, you know, I was considered as being fair. You know, every kid had an opportunity. I mean, I think one of my best skills was making kids think I didn't like them.
Yeah.
You know, you treat everybody the same. You don't have any, you know, preferences over anything. That I emphasize the right things. Winning was important, but more importantly, life skills, being a good teammate, being responsible, being honest, all traits that you need to be successful in life. And, you know, personally, I think the three most important words in the English language are mom, dad, and coach. Think of all the influence those three names have on people.
Yeah.
And if a kid can leave my program, not necessarily, you know, remember the wins and losses, but the skills and the things we taught them to do, to be responsible for, and to become a good husband, a good citizen, a good member of the community, hard worker, and somebody that's, you know, responsible, reliable, and somebody you can depend on. And, you know, there are times I'll bump into kids that I see that I coached, and I see them with their families and whatnot, and they're coaching Little League and doing this type of thing. All the traits and skills that we emphasize as a player, that they're coming back and giving back to the community. So I hope the underlying message is, you know, he was a good guy who worked hard, who prepared us, who taught us to be good people.
Yeah. You can't ask for much more than that, Coach, right?
I would hope not.
A life well lived. And I appreciate, you know, you spending this time with me again, giving back. You know, my goal of trying to document a lot of these stories and experiences for other coaches and players to have, you know, and watch on video online and capture a lot of this that a lot of people don't know about.
Well, I can't wait to look at
me too.
my peers and see what, you know, what they have
it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
But it's a great thing you're doing. I think it's an awesome tool for a young person to touch base. And I think as a young coach coming in, reach out to your resources, reach out to other coaches, young coaches, and give you advice, good and bad.
Build that network.
Yes, for sure. You're going to learn from somebody, you know?
Yeah.
You can learn from anybody. I mean, every game, some team comes out and whips on you, and they're doing something, and you say, well, you know what? That looks pretty effective. I think maybe we'll try to implement that.
Maybe
so
I got to research that.
You learn and put it in, and, you know.
All right. Okay, everybody. Been a great day here with Coach Camirand, Memorial Field, talking football. Hope you enjoyed it as well. If you did, hit like, subscribe, drop any comments you want. If you played for Coach Camirand and want to drop a comment, that would be great too. And looking forward to next time. Thanks, Coach.
that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was good. Now, where do I
to be
go?
with